Well, this was a very exciting episode of Faragon, probably one of my favorite episodes over the past couple of months from this series. It was really interesting learning what was the true motivation, also learning how all this kind of corruption and sabotage was occurring. And I like it anytime you have essentially the perfect crime. You have a person who fits everything in terms of like who could possibly do this, what would be the motivation, and then you have someone like Hans who, you're noticing that shit's been kind of modified. Obviously, something's being covered up. He would have, obviously, a reason to go against the Prime Minister, especially because there's no glory in his work anymore. He wasn't really behind the kind of symbol of unification. It just kind of seems like the perfect crime, but of course it can't be so easy. And I really liked learning about the backstory of this Eddie guy, but also his son Ted. And I like how you have this war that's ended, and many of the characters have come to accept the war's ended, the atrocities that have occurred. At this point, there's no use holding on to that rage. However, it's very clear why some would want to get revenge for either themselves or for people that they love, in this case Ted, because you have a war that was so devastating, united the entire world, but at the end of the day, when everyone who's helped you get to your spot of power, you cut them off like you no longer need them, by punishing them, making them criminals, or stripping away the titles that kind of made them someone special and got you to where you are. It's very clear why someone would want revenge for what's happened to their father, and also how you pretty much used and abused everyone for your own political gain, and I really enjoyed learning about what truly was going on. Something I was quite curious about was how in the actual hell was some of these suits being modified. Having the assistant to the main person behind kind of studying this, it would be very easy to slip in some sabotage to be able to make it look like the new models are malfunctioning, as basically a ploy so they would be pulled away and the older models would be used, which have this kind of like default switch that can be override, and then you could control everything. From my understanding, or what I was kind of anticipating, was how you would have the saboteur who would actually just have like a few of these soldiers malfunction and make it look like innocent civilians would get killed. But we have something so much more interesting and more personal by literally making the entire government shit their pants thinking that their new models will go haywire because you have a couple of malfunctions that just can't be explained, to then throwing back the old model, which has this kill switch that can actually kill the Prime Minister because you can control more than one. If that isn't absolutely cool, I don't know what is. That is a really interesting mechanic, and I thought it was actually pretty clever too, because it explains why everything was happening. It doesn't make it feel overpowered like this one little whistle could do everything. No, that whistle was literally just doing one bot at a time because it was kind of sabotaged. There was extra pieces in there that obviously would be removed when they started to study them again. But then you learned that the man behind the old tech has kind of these failsafes that he could use with that whistle, and that is just absolutely incredible. Even more interesting is how Radon didn't even try to help the Prime Minister, only one did. So that's going to lead to some interesting political nightmares in the future, but this episode was so interesting to me because anytime you have that perfect crime that's just like, here you go, here's your candidate, this is who has to be behind it, but there's always something more than meets the eye, and that was so interesting learning how everything was functioning, because they easily could have went with something a lot more basic where it is just a whistle, they kind of overwrote the code, and that's why they could kind of mass produce and just mass control basically the entire new models, and that would have been rather interesting. The entire symbol, the 10 years since the wars ended, you built this amazing tech, and then look at what happens. Innocent civilians, if not political leaders, are assassinated by this tech, the government gets overthrown, and a new leader is put in charge. That would have been interesting, and I probably would have been singing the praise of something like that. But to have it be so much more interesting and so much more personal that you were just trying to lure the government into thinking the new tech was the problem, so you wouldn't even focus on the old tech, which then everything would go haywire. That is absolutely incredible, and I love the personal motivations behind everyone, especially with Hans just wanting to keep this a secret because he obviously would be able to tell who probably was behind it, but he just can't bring himself to hurt his friend's son. And that was just the personal touches. The little personal touches really make this rather interesting. Stuff like Bittersweet betraying the group with Dorothea so she can read the book, memorize it, but of course lead the book because that was their deal, and them not being able to arrest her. Like, all the little moments throughout this episode were really exciting. I mean, it's not totally surprising that Bittersweet was in on it with our characters and that they weren't actually going to be thrown over. They did look a little concerned last week, but that was just kind of them playing the character, and I like that. I like how when you see the fairies, for the most part, they do look rather jarring in comparison to the normal characters, the human figures. But when they do things like where they'll have like this smoke or mist or any dimly lit scenes, you'll see that the fairies blend in with the scenery and objects rather well, and it gives this very unique kind of aura and just the way they'll pop out from the scenes at hand, which really make it exciting. Then when they do feel jarring against the characters, they're fairies, they're not human objects, so it makes total sense why they don't mesh in with the general world. But there definitely are certain ways that you can make them look like, holy shit, this looks like a great shot, because of just the fog or the mist or just what the fairies are doing to the world to make it feel so goddamn disorienting, which I absolutely adore. Just all the little personal touches throughout this episode just really make something like this really impressive. Last week was very much a setup style episode, getting the ball moving, and this is the episode where everything hit the fan and the case was finally solved in a pretty personal and dramatic way, which I really enjoyed. But I like just what this series is truly going for. It's not always trying to blow your mind with holy shit, life or death, everything's going to shit, but rather there's these personal motivations of why people would want to overthrow a government, if not just kill the current leader because he is a absolute scumbag. And we've seen quite a few instances where he's used people, such as the fairy soldiers, to get him to where he is, to then making them illegal or hunting them down, persecuting them. Like, there is so much horrible corruption within this leadership, and you can see why so many people are taking it as a vendetta to take out the man in charge and hopefully get someone who wouldn't use and abuse. But of course, you know, power corrupts all. So no matter who's on that throne there, it's not going to work out too well. But at this point, I kind of want to side with the people trying to assassinate this prime minister. Granted, we don't know all about him. We really haven't seen his personal backstories, things of that nature. So maybe there's a lot to him that will actually make us side with him more. But up to this point, from all the perspectives we've seen, it seems like the prime minister is an absolute scumbag who used and abused, and once he got where he needs to be, and he has an army to back him, he tossed away everyone and everything that got him to where he was, and that's a pretty scummy move. But I really enjoyed the personal touch of this episode. I truly feel that this was the most personal of all the episodes. It really felt as if there was a believable reason for trying to assassinate the highest political leader in your country. You could really feel for this man and what happened to his father, but you could also feel for Hans and why he was trying to hide this away, because he didn't want to convince himself that his best friend's son would do something this horrible, and maybe there was something, you know, less deadly that he was aiming for, as no one truly was hurt at this point in time. And it's just such an interesting concept. I love just seeing all the little pieces click, and so many things that I was thinking, I know exactly where they want to go. You know, Faragon isn't trying to, you know, break boundaries and really shock you with, holy shit, you didn't see this twist coming. But this is the first time I really felt like I didn't see this coming. I thought it was going to be the new models would attack innocents, and that was the entire plan. But to have that actually be a decoy, so the old models with the kill switch, that is absolutely incredible. Maybe not everyone's going to be, you know, so wowed by that moment as me, but it really made Faragon into something truly special. I've been enjoying Faragon every single week, as seen by these reviews, but an episode like this really shows me what Faragon is truly capable of. And when we get into that second core, I expect a lot more interesting twists and turns to come our way. And I think, you know, before this season wraps up with the final 4 episodes, we're going to see something probably pretty interesting with Raydon or any of the other characters or organizations like Arcane, like trying to basically destroy the world order, and where that could truly go. This episode didn't really blow me away visually for the most part. There's a couple of shots with the fairies, and overall just kind of more intense sequences with the running that were pretty decent, but for the most part, Faragon isn't trying to blow your mind with spectacle. There is a lot of close-ups, but I have to say, in terms of close-ups, this does have some pretty interesting facial details, and just overall framing of shots to make it feel like, even if a character isn't speaking, you get a pretty good sense of what they're feeling. The dread, the caution, the concern, or even just the more blissful aura that they're radiating, you generally get to understand what it is they are feeling just by the framing of a shot. So even though, yes, the animation is pretty much non-existent in quite a few handful of scenes, it doesn't change the fact that the way they frame these shots, it does get across what it needs to in terms of selling the emotion at hand, which not a lot of anime can do because they rather focus on the flashy and then pretty much ignore the smaller details that I find quite important. The voice acting, especially for Hans in this episode, holy shit, you can feel the pain in his voice, and even Ted, who is just like trying to get revenge, and revenge isn't the answer, but you kind of understand where he's coming from, and I just love the anger and just passion from the voice actors, the sorrow with the crying and just the rage, fuming as if you're going to explode like a ticking time bomb. You felt the passion in the actors, and then just at the end where you're just saying like you have to give up, the war is over, you almost felt a bittersweet tone to that, almost saying like, I completely understand where you're going with this, but the war is over. It is such an interesting tale to me. I think episodes like these really highlight just truly what's going on with the political landscape at hand, having a leader use and abuse everyone around him, and then what will happen after. Even if you cut ties or cut off the heads of the people that got you to where you are, they still had families, they still had allies, and those people aren't going to sit by just quietly. They're going to bide their time, they're going to bite their tongue until the time is right. As we see 10 years later, you're seeing some crazy shit go down, and this is just the starting point. We're only a third of the way through this series, and you know that this is just the beginning, and this Prime Minister is in for a very rude awakening. And if they show us a backstory that makes the Prime Minister look like a saint and a god, that's going to be even more tragic to what's ultimately going to happen, because I don't see this man making it out alive. But then again, Faragon has shown us that it could do some interesting twists, so only time will tell. Overall, I thought this was a great episode, probably top 2 of Faragon for me. I really enjoyed it. I'm be very curious for those who are watching this show. What did you think? Did you love the episode as much as myself? Did you see the twist coming with the older boss rather than the newer ones actually being the secret weapon? Or was this a complete and utter shock to you like it was for me? Let me know down in the comment section below. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have to be new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.